I think we're ready. How many people got? 11. Some of you are doubling up, I'm sure. And so, there we go. Well, excuse me, clearing my throat. We're ready to roll. Bottom line, I got one more artist of Mannerism that I want to show you and talk about a little bit. And then I want to launch into chapter 24 with Baroque. And we won't get through that. And the other part is that I have your research paper prompt ready to roll. And it's under assignments, and I'll show it to you and we'll talk about it before we hang up today. So we were talking about Mannerism the last we met. Bottom line, what is Mannerism? What the heck is Mannerism? I have some funny mannerisms. You know, like I shake my head when I'm trying to think of stuff to say. Mannerism. Well, then let me tell you. It's something that is basically attributed to Italy and Spain somewhat. And it is a style, and it's a style that emerges after the High Renaissance. And scholars have thrown this around for a long time. We're not exactly sure why the change, but we do know what happened. And what happened was that we started to see a break from, in terms of composition, this orderly, structured, typically triangular composition where everything is centralized. We start to see what we would call very busy compositions, and where oftentimes nothing is centralized. I'm going to go back a little bit here if I can. And this might take a little bit, but let me tell you. Mannerism out of Italy looks a lot like, it's a long chapter, would you say? Oh, yeah, I forgot how many slides we had. Bottom line, we're almost there. Right before we got to Albrecht Dürer. Maybe not. At any rate, what I wanted to show you about Mannerism has everything to do with the deposition, the descent from the cross, where I showed you the painter had actually created a circular composition with Christ and the angels and the attendants and Christ's body. And there was really not anything in the middle. You could just about make a complete circle with all of the figures. Mannerism. Madonna with the long neck. Hey, you guys, I want to show you my granddaughter. She's here. Yes, okay. I know they're listening. So
Hi.
hi. Say hi. Hi. 6 years old, first grade. A joy of my life.
What's her name?
What's your name? Akira. Did you hear that, Robin?
No.
Akira.
Akira, that's so cute.
Yeah, see, that's why I talk loud when I'm on this, because you have to. Yeah. So let me talk to my students some more. Yeah, you can. Hey, pull up my lap here if you want. All right. Okay. So mannerism, the Madonna with the long neck, exaggerated forms. The idea of the Madonna having this long neck and the long baby Jesus as a way of showing elegance, maybe royalty, maybe high fashion beauty. So anyway, this is Mannerism. This is a guy named El Greco, and he painted in Spain, and this is circa 1610. So you see, we've kind of covered some ground here, at least 2 centuries so far. And they called him El Greco because he was from Greece. And he made his way through Italy and saw what the Italians had been doing. And he came to Spain and made his career as the court painter for the Spanish king. And so he brought a lot of this Mannerist sensibility with him. And if you take a look at this landscape, you'll see there's like really no central point in this. In fact, the center of it, if I could, you see like right here, it's like that's not really the focal point. And you see all kinds of activity basically in this circle. You see Toledo, not Ohio, Spain. Um, And you see that in the distance, and you see the threatening clouds. You actually see a lot of the brushwork too. This painting could have been made in the 20th century. And as a matter of fact, El Greco was someone that a lot of the 20th century, oh dear, painters looked to. Ah, Kira, I got to get up. This is not working for me. Sorry, guys. You see it?
All is good.
Okay, good. Um, so previous slide is where I was at. And you see the color is distorted. It's not naturalism. And you could call this kind of mannerism actually expressionism. And that is where color and form are distorted for emotional effect. That's a textbook definition of expressionism, and it actually fits what El Greco was doing in the early 17th century. And so, view of Toledo, and I put the star by this one because this is really probably one of the best known El Greco paintings of all, the Burial of Count Orgaz. And you see him here, and this is all painted almost like in Northern Europe, high style of the day, the frilly collars, all of the important men, the clergy, the monk, the deceased. And then you see up here, there's Jesus, and we see all of the saints and angels, and it's all elongated and it uses dark color. And in a lot of ways, I think you could say that the skin color on these figures is not particularly naturalistic. So we've come a long way from High Renaissance and Raphael and the Sistine Chapel ceiling. This is probably, if it's anything like the High Renaissance, it probably took a few uh, hints from Michelangelo's The Last Supper, where the space is kind of confused. The central point, again, would be right there. There's this is not the focal point. We see all of this, what you would call busyness. And so that is El Greco. And he's really one of the first Spanish painters that we've actually found in the book to this point. And so that ends chapter 23. I would like to open up Baroque here, if you'll bear with me. Slideshow from the beginning. Ah, I got to get into Zoom now. And share screen. There we go. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. The Baroque. So basically, we see that the Renaissance, I'm talking about how to chop down the timeline of history. We see Renaissance basically 15th century to 1400s. And it's not an exact science. It's not an exact timeline. People just don't change and revert or change into something else just because the calendar went from 1400s to 1500. But that's kind of a general timeline. And so the High Renaissance, a little bit of overlap. A lot of people say 1480, 15 to 1520, 40 years. Some call it 20 years, 1500, 1520. A lot of scholars agree that the major artist of the time, Raphael, who died in 1520, Leonardo had been dead. Michelangelo was still working, but his style changed. So anyway, and then we call the time from 1520 to 1600 basically Mannerism. And that's where all of the artists kind of start doing different things. Not so much in Northern Europe, but we see that in Italy and we saw that in Spain. But as I was saying, there's not a big change that comes with the change of um, of a century. Well, 1600 kind of does that, and we say Baroque started in the year 1600, and I'll show you why historians basically agree on that time. Vatican City, first illustration, chapter 24. And what is happening religiously, politically? What is happening is that in the previous century, in the 1500s, the influence of the church declined dramatically. Anybody got anything you want to throw into that statement or push back? How about Martin Luther? We have the emergence of Protestantism in Northern Europe. Now, Spain, Italy, much of Germany, they stay with the Roman Catholic Church, but Protestantism kind of takes over. Northern Europe takes over England and so on. We have the Protestant rebellion, and we have a rival Christianity right there in Europe. And in the year 1600, the Vatican, they were reaping much rewards from their players, especially Spain, colonizing much of the world, Spain and Portugal, both Catholic nations. They wanted to reassert the Catholic Church. And the Vatican was going to be central to that revitalized Catholic Church. And so they really invested a lot in the Vatican and in Rome and Baroque Italy. And so it's not an accident that we start with this guy. And this was actually much later, in the middle of the century, but this is the Ecstasy of St. Teresa, the Coronaro Chapel, Rome. And so you can kind of see this is really quite amazing. You see how highly decorated this is, how it's painted. Bernini was a sculptor, and the church commissioned him to do all kinds of things. So Rome and the Vatican, they start building buildings. They put statues in public places. They do fountains. They make Rome, at least they tried to make Rome, as glorious as it was 1500 years prior. And so I have this is the picture that's in the book. Wanted to show you a couple of close-ups. I'll show you this is this area. And Bernini, the Ecstasy of St. Teresa. Anybody know about St. Teresa? She was
I don't.
oh, yeah.
I do not. I wish I did. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you a little bit. She was a holy person. She was from Spain. Avila is in Spain. And she became a much noted saint. In fact, she achieved sainthood not that long after her death. And she wrote extensively about the joys of believing in Christ and being a Christian. She had some sort of malady, some sort of whatever it was, we don't know, but she had this condition where she had suffered these excruciating pains and presumably in her side there was something wrong internally, but it's It's the 16th century. They don't have MRI. They don't have lab tests. They don't know what it is. But Teresa, despite having all of these medical problems, and she had been in agony much of her life, and that's what this angel here represents. The angel with the spear and pointed right at her torso, you see. And despite having this, whatever medical condition caused her this great pain and suffering, she saw this as a blessing. And that was a sign from God. And she wrote about this extensively. And you can look this up. I mean, my wife is a lay Carmelite. She belongs to the lay Carmelite order. They read and believe in Saint Teresa extensively. And so, anyway, she is a mystic. She is a writer. She is a woman of faith. And that's what this sculpture depicts. There's a couple of other things noteworthy, and that is that Bernini uses brass here. See the brass rods as light or grace shining from above, you see? And instead of agony, this was titled The Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. So she was a 16th century holy woman. And so this sculpture has been analyzed over and over and over again. And it's kind of iconic for the Baroque era. One of the descriptors, one of the adjectives often associated with the Baroque era is theater. That not only did they make sculpture and painting, they made situations, and they were really into the emotions. And so this is the close-up of St. Teresa's face. And you can see, in fact, a lot of art historians talked about you could almost hear her groan. You see her eyes half open, definitely on the edge of consciousness, the ecstasy of Saint Teresa. And um, so this is theater. It's set up like theater. It's set up like a play. And theater, I should say, does a couple of things. One, it is there to evoke an emotional response from the viewer. If you go to theater, the idea is that it touches you as a human being. You have an emotional response, whether it's comedy, the emotion is laughter and joy, whether it's drama, where you have empathy for the subjects, the actors, the story, so on. And so this is Bernini's The Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. And so this is where they get the theatrical from Bernini. And so I got a little bit of the architecture, and it starts to, in Baroque era, starts to regain some of the ornamentation and decoration that we saw before the Renaissance. But it comes back in a different way. You know, we talked about the Gothic and the spires and the excessive sculptural adornment. this, it's kind of calmed down. It's a lot, it's actually a little more than what you would see in Renaissance time, but you see the emergence of things that are just purely decorative, like the scrolls here on the sides. We still see a fascination with order, proportion, symmetry. It's symmetrical, both sides, one just like the other. The pediment comes out of ancient Greece, and so on, a small pediment above the tympanium, etc. This is all Baroque architecture. And they move away from the austere of the Renaissance, uh, and and they bring back some of the ornamentation, and they still have this nod to classical architecture. And up here, you see the symmetry. Got a clock here, got a clock there. Very symmetrical. Put the obelisk right dead center in front of St. Peter's. And you can see this is 1606, so it's early in the century. And this is the great St. Peter's of the Vatican. And there it is here. And here is the plaza. And it was designed by Bernini. What we find here, as we found with Michelangelo, is that sculptors are often architects as well. They design three-dimensional space. They understand three-dimensional space. And so this is the plaza, the piazza, if you will, in front of St. Peter's. And so there's the obelisk, dead center. Bernini, royal stairway. Symmetry, sculpture. And so Bernini, I want to tell you a little bit about him here. He didn't do everything himself. And in fact, he had a workshop, and he had many people working for him, doing a lot of the work. And like I said, they did fountains with statues and statues with running water and things coming out. You know, it was just truly magnificent. That was the plan. This is inside St. Peter's. Look at this. I want to show you this. 66 feet high. There's the altar. It's where the Pope would say Mass, but this is huge. And it has columns, bronze columns, and they are very ornate. And you see they have this spiral twist to them. It's an element of decoration that we haven't seen until the Baroque period. Bernini, some themes never die. Put the star on this one too. David, and we know about David. We saw that in Florence. We saw that during the Renaissance. We saw that with Donatello, Del Verrocchio, Michelangelo, and again Bernini. But of all of those David sculptures, this one is markedly different. We see with the Donatello, the triumphant, the young man, immodest, standing there over the head of the Goliath. Kind of the same with Del Verrocchio, except he's clothed. Michelangelo's David looks much like an ancient Greek god. And this is altogether different. And you see, David has his sling right there. And in that sling, he has a rock. He's got his ammunition, his rocks in the pouch here. He's got a cloth for modesty. But the twist of his body is twisted this way and his head is turned back the other way. He's taking aim. He is very, look at that look on his face. He's about ready to give it his best shot. And he seems to know what's on the line here. This is, and he's coiled, if you will. And it's almost as though he's about ready to swing into motion and destroy Goliath. And so, theater, the theatric, it still has its religious significance and it also has its political significance because in Italy, they are still broken up into duchies and city states, and it wasn't really a unified country. They had all the way up through Germany and through the Alps, modern day Switzerland, and say Italy. They had what they call papal states. They had what they called the Holy Roman Empire, but it wasn't a unified country, not like France, not like Spain, not like Portugal. And so, anyway, here it is. This is emblematic of the Baroque in Italy. And I got some, oh, I just one little mention about this. Bernini's Apollo and Daphne. And this is from ancient Roman, Greco Roman myth. And the idea is Apollo is the male Roman god. And he falls in love with Daphne, but Daphne is turning into a tree. Anyway, they still have an eye towards the classical. They haven't abandoned that. It's just that they found a way for both of these to coexist. And here's a fountain, a Bernini fountain, fountain of the four rivers. What they had too, those of you who were in uh, um, World Art and Ideas 1, you'll know about the aqueducts that brought a lot of water to Rome. They had plenty of water. They had so much water they could do stuff like this. Uh, and so Bernini's sculpture and a fountain and an obelisk, that's right out of Egypt. But I was saying earlier, Bernini had a workshop. He was like the main artist, and it said that he approved all of this, but it was more or less a factory. And so here we go. I want to show you this Borromini, uh, another great architect of the time. Here is another Borromini. And you see, like before, it still owes a great deal of depth. They still look at classical Greco-Roman architecture, but they use curvilinears. And up here, see this right here, and these curvilinear lines. I went to a talk once where the speaker was talking about the difference between Renaissance and Baroque architecture. And she said, and it's stuck in my mind because I've not been able to disprove this, that in the Renaissance, it was all about geometry. It was about circles, triangles, squares, and rectangles. It was geometry that ruled the architecture. It was all based on geometric principles and a lack of extraneous ornamentation, but geometry was the foundational rule of Renaissance architecture. She said that in the Baroque, it was the curvilinear lines, and you can see that here, and it was the oval. The oval replaces the circle, and the curvilinear replaces the straight lines. And so we see that on the inside too. Borromini, the interior, look, curvilinear, the oval inside the dome, oval. Here's the floor plan. The dome seen from below, the oval. And you still see this, what is somewhat like Corinthian columns right out of ancient Greece and Rome. You see a lot of the same elements, but the oval dominates, and the semicircle. And here's another Borromini. So I'm showing you all this stuff. This is 17th century Rome. They really did a total makeover of the entire city. And as I said, it was because they wanted to celebrate Roman Catholicism and they wanted to put their foot down and say, this is the true center of Christianity, not Martin Luther, not the Protestants, but. And so this is high tech, it is high art, it is 17th century Rome. Check this out, more Borromini. Magnificent. The curvilinear, the straight, but mostly the curvilinear and the oval. And so other architects existed too, but wasn't Bernini doing everything, or Borromini for that matter. Um, all kinds of variations, all kinds of breaks from the high Renaissance, from ancient Greece and Rome. Guar, Guarini, it's hard to say that. This is in Turin, this is a little farther north. But check this out. The curvilinear, the decorative, the scrolls, still owes indebtedness to high Renaissance. But look, I mean, look at the scrolls, look at the faux drapery, look at the curvilinear, the bloop, 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 and back out. And so what we have here, I showed you sculpture, showed you architecture. We start to see some variations on different kinds of things. This is the flight in Egypt, and that is where Herod was going to kill all of the young male babies, Mary and Joseph, baby Jesus, left. They went to Egypt. to save baby Jesus. But at any rate, they start to really kind of do this pastoral thing. But I do want to show you this. That was uh, Carracci. Did this too. The Loves of the Gods, ceiling frescoes. Again, they were making peace with all of the Greco-Roman heritage. Um, and you see a lot of things up here that reference Greek and Roman mythology. And so, in some ways, it's sort of a Sistine Chapel, like painting, fresco. But I want to show you how this evolves because this was early in the century. And this is a little later, Rene. And then it goes into this, which is kind of that busy mannerism, but they kind of took a lot of the things they learned from the Renaissance and they made this high, deep space. And so I'm gonna go back here. You would see this is like a flat, hang on the wall painting. This is that Baroque decoration, highly skilled, high use of space. And so I wanted to point that out because we do have a frame of reference here, and that is the Sistine Chapel. And so there was a great painter from Italy in the 17th century, in the 1600s, and this is the guy's name's Caravaggio, and this is an early work, 1595, and you can see he's pretty well accomplished. It's that kind of chaotic composition that we see from Mannerism, and we see that he does understand anatomy and space and things. But Caravaggio's contribution, and it'll be a lasting contribution, is his use of light and dark. I used the word chiaroscuro last week and showed you the Albrecht Dürer with the dark background and showed you some other things. And chiaroscuro means dark modeling. Tenebrism basically means darkness. And they set their subjects in dark places and let the light describe the figures or the subject. And so here we see the calling of St. Matthew. We see the light coming in from the window. And this was big. Caravaggio painted many pictures of the saints and especially the apostles. Here is the conversion of St. Paul. St. Paul was a Roman soldier. He was on his way to Damascus when he was struck by a bolt of lightning and at that point realized that Jesus was God, converted, became an apostle. Actually, the apostles were kind of a group of various sort of people, fishermen, tax collectors, soldiers, etc. A physician, St. Luke. Anyway, he was struck from his horse, but look at this dark background. This is Caravaggio, this is Tenebrism, and this style of a dark background, it'll sweep across Europe. This is a whole different way of creating space. It doesn't rely quite as much on a vanishing point. It's not reliant on the deep space that all of the Renaissance artists loved. And in fact, you could make that black and increase the drama. And as I mentioned about Bernini and theatrics, this is theatrical as well. And this is a huge painting, 7 feet 6 inches by 5 feet 9 inches. And the way it's positioned in Rome is that your head is actually down here and you're looking up, just as St. Paul is looking up. His arms are outreached. It is a very dramatic scene, and the drama is only enhanced by the use of these strong contrasts between light and dark. And so that's Caravaggio. Here's another Caravaggio, Tenebrism, theater, emotion. And again, we're looking up at this. It's almost as though we're sitting in the front row of this drama. And here's another Caravaggio, The Taking of Christ. And you can see this is when they arrested him in the Garden of Gethsemane, and Tenebrism. And Artemisia Gentileschi, Judith slaying Holofernes. And this is from the Old Testament. And Judith was the one that saved her people from the brutal Holofernes. She snuck into his tent at night, brought her sword, she and her handmaiden, they cut his head off. But she was a student of Caravaggio. And again, Tenebrism, strong contrast, lights, darks, drama. They can't really get too much more dramatic than someone cutting someone's head off. And here she is in a self-portrait as the allegory of painting. And so, yeah, we're seeing the emergence of artists. And again, I have to say that this is really, we owe a debt of gratitude to a lot of scholars that have traced the provenance, the authenticity, the attribution of some of these paintings that were kind of lost or misidentified as belonging to a male artist. So anyway, Gentileschi, and I showed you the changes in ceiling paintings, that it goes from that to this. Another one, Gauli. This is Baroque ceiling painting, and they're so incredibly, the illusion is so incredible. It's kind of hard to understand or visualize where the actual ceiling of these domes and these and whatever the ceiling is, because the illusion is so amazingly realistic. And so, let's see, Baroque Spain. I showed you El Greco for Mannerism. We see a lot of similarities. He's dark modeling, tenebrism, the the martyrdom of Saint Philip, another religious, like I say, the painting of saints from Saint Teresa, Saint Paul, Saint Matthew, and so on. Saints were becoming very important in the understanding of what is expected from a Christian, from those who believe in Christ. And so, these saints actually become role models. And that still exists today. If you've gone to Catholic school and studied the catechism, you probably learned a lot about many saints. Uh, Zurbaran, more Tenebrism, Saint Serapion, 1628. Wood carving. And it reminded me of Olivia wrote about wood carving, told me about her grandfather being a wood carver. And that's another thing that's really starting to come to light, how much wood carving was prominent in these years. The guy who is really probably the most accomplished, famous artist of the Baroque in Spain is this guy, Diego Velázquez. And some more Tenebrism, you see, is really like right there with the Italians and Caravaggio and so on. Some history painting. But I wanted to show you this painting. This is where we'll end today. Las Meninas, the Maids of Honor, mid-century 1656. Velázquez was the court painter. This is his portrait. You see he has a palette, has some extra brushes, has a brush in his hand, and here is the canvas he is painting. And so what Velázquez is doing here, he's painting in the royal palace. And this is the princess and her attendants and the family pet and the nun and the king. But see, there's a kind of a weird thing going on here because the space is such that we could be looking at a mirror and all of these people are looking at the mirror and all of this could be in the foreground. Scholars have really tried to figure this out. But the idea that Velázquez very cleverly, very adeptly, was able to create this kind of three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. And so anyway, it's very playful, it's very naturalistic. And I have to say this, and probably most of all, is that this is a portrait of the royal family behind the scenes. This is them doing what they do on an everyday basis. They're not sitting in their thrones. They're not posed. They got the dog in the picture. They got people talking, not even paying attention to what's going on. And presumably you got the king looking back, trying to check out what the heck is all going on here. And so it's very, very human. And that's not something you see when depicting royalty. They are typically dressed in their regalia, they're posed, they're seated on their throne, or they're doing some kind of historic, brave act, say like leading an army into battle or something. is very honest, very human. And so that's where I want to end this. And I wanted to show you this before we go. And there we go. Research paper due in 2 weeks. It's a short paper, 5 pages. And I'll go through the outline with you. It says, here are the instructions and guidelines for your paper. First page doesn't count as a page, unfortunately. That's a cover sheet. Does not count toward the 5-page requirement. And centered on that page is the title of the work, the artist, the media, the date of the artwork's creation, the page number, and illustration number. So you'll see that it'll be like 24.7 or something. And under that, your name, you're the author. Page 1, history of the artwork, the time period, biographic information of the artist. If we were doing El Greco, we would say it was in Mannerist era, post High Renaissance. He came from Greece, traveled through Italy where he learned how to paint, went to Spain, became the king's court painter, blah, blah, blah. And so page 2, we're talking about El Greco's analysis of the subject matter. Does this work tell a story about the culture in which it was created? And sorry about the spacing. It looked good. Then when I published it, it went crazy. So anyway, what is the subject matter? View of Toledo. You could take the upper corner, talk about what those buildings are, what that road is, what the river is, the thunderstorm impending, etc. That's the subject matter. Stylistic analysis would be about why it is that there's no central focal point, which comes out of Mannerism, the strong contrast, the unnatural colors, and so on. I have a list here of formal analysis stuff too that I'll put on there to help you out. Information about the media and techniques. And so that is not really so much about the specific artwork, but more about, like, this is oil painting. Oil painting was developed in Northern Europe, 14th, 15th century, Jan van Eyck, blah, blah, blah. Information about, and it was used with, sometimes with tempera, sometimes on board, sometimes on canvas with gesso. And then page 5, your personal opinion and feelings about the artwork, which is why I gave you the quiz that I did, because that'll be pretty much at least part of what you'll be writing about on page 5. Bibliography and I got another PowerPoint about that too that I'll put up as soon as I get done talking. Looks like not everything got published that I thought. Could be that I didn't press save. But at any rate, 2 weeks. Think about what you want to write about. Like I say, it's any illustrated artwork from the textbook. I didn't say you couldn't write about what you'd already did quiz 1 on. And so as you dig into it, I'm sure I'll have questions from you. Expected. And any questions now?
I have a question. Would you
Yeah.
like to include pictures in our essay or not at all?
Yes, you may, but they don't count towards the uh, amount that you have to write.
Right, right. Is there like a word count that you have for like an average?
No, I just have a page count and basically 12-point font, double space,
Gotcha.
5 pages. So however that shakes out.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Oh, and finally, I just wanted to say this too. Format, Word doc or PDF, and upload it here. Submitting a file upload, file types. And the reason I'm doing that is that it's really too much to put into this space. Secondly, if I don't specify, I may end up getting some files that I can't open. And so I'm limiting that to the Word doc and PDF. PDF is kind of the universal, though. It's the O negative blood type of files. And so I'm glad you guys didn't have to drive. I'm hoping you're staying warm. I am. My granddaughter left, by the way. I go track her down, make sure she's not getting in stuff. All right. Well, I'll see you Wednesday. Be safe, be warm. Maybe the roads will be cleared. Maybe we can meet on campus. We'll see. So, good night, everyone.
Good night. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.